right, friends, welcome back to Healedish. I'm so excited today. I am here with Azriél, and I saw her come across my For You page, and I knew that I wanted to have her on because she shared an experience about having to do a purity pledge on national TV. And I was like, she needs to come on the podcast, and her dad is famous, and you kind of lean into the nepo baby thing on your TikTok, which I love. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your work as well. And when you reached out, it was like an instant yes, for sure.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So do you just want to jump in and tell us who your dad is, and also what religious system were you raised in and what that was like for you?
Yeah, so my dad is Azriél Crews. He's an actor and a host and a bunch of other
America's
things.
Got Talent.
Yes, he hosts America's
Love
Got
that
Talent. And yeah, my father, he became an actor when I was like a preteen teenager. So we actually, before this, he played in the NFL. So we lived very different lifestyles pre and post Hollywood. So me and my older sister got to have the sort of NFL life where we moved every year. And then when he started working in Hollywood in LA, that was like a whole second life. It was a very different world we were entering into. And he started to get famous when I was like in high school. And then that's when our lives really started to change. And we ended up on a reality show, and I ended up doing a purity pledge on the reality show. And yes, the rest is history.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I can't even imagine what that would be like to have a semi-normal life beforehand, although I guess you were always traveling as well with the NFL, so I didn't know that. But yeah, just the big shift there. What was that like for you? How did that feel adjusting in school? Like, did the kids talk about it and all of that?
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment. Like, I mean, I can't say I've ever had a very conventional life, even though they were two different worlds. The world of sports and entertainment are really different. And to be honest, my dad was not like a star in the sports world. So, he wasn't exactly the big moneymaker on the team. So we were living a pretty normal, I would say, like middle class life. We had to move a lot because he got cut from his teams like every year. So like he played on like 7 different teams in like 6 years or something like that. It was basically the first like 7 years of my life. He was on a different team every year, and we moved all the time. So as a kid, I was kind of shy. So that was actually kind of hard for me, moving every year. But I got to see a lot of the world. I mean, like we lived in like San Diego, we lived in Wisconsin, we lived in Michigan, we lived in Virginia, we lived in Germany for a couple of months.
Oh my gosh.
So like,
where was your favorite place that you lived out of all of those?
I think my favorite place was, I have fond memories of Germany, but I was really young when that happened. But I do remember loving how that felt. It was just for like a summer, but I really do. Those are some of my earliest memories. And then I really loved living in Virginia because I loved, we had all 4 seasons,
Yes,
so I loved
it's
having.
Gorgeous there.
It is really gorgeous. And then from there we moved to LA and then stayed in LA, a few different cities in LA after that, but like pretty much stayed in LA after that.
Oh gosh, yeah. So were you really involved in the church? I know you were moving around a lot.
Yeah.
So were you guys just constantly church hopping, or did you just do church at home? Because I know some people, they'll just put it on the TV and do it that way.
So that is actually a really important part of our experience, was that my mother in particular was the one who kept us really in the church. She was often working in the music ministry at church, doing choir directing and music, for the worship team. And so we were at church a lot. And naturally, because we moved around a lot, we were always having to find a new church home. And that was interesting because I found that when people ask me like, what was my like denomination, it's kind of hard to say because we did go in and out of a lot of different churches. I would say evangelical very broadly, but we were in and out of a lot of like Black churches, and then we were at some mega churches, and then when we landed in LA, our church was pretty diverse, but it was also pretty wealthy. Like there was a lot of money, there was a lot of production value. So It was more of that sort of mega church vibe, but the community was pretty diverse, but it did give a sort of specific like Hillsong-esque vibe once we got to LA. So I've had a lot of different church experiences. I've seen a lot of charismatic churches, being slain in the spirit, speaking in tongues, a lot of that. And then my mother actually was a huge, huge fan of televangelists. So we did actually watch a lot of Joyce Meyer Benny Hinn,
Oh my gosh, not Benny.
yes.
No, that's so funny because I'm like, he's so extreme. All the videos I've ever seen of him,
Girl,
oh my God. I just see the funny YouTube edits where they put bodies hit the floor to it and stuff like that.
It's so funny to see it now because it's like, it was just how I grew up, like, and then to see how like the rest of the world was viewing that is like so fascinating. That's the biggest like, trip when you leave, your faith, is that like a lot of people thought this was really strange, and I was just like in it, like I just didn't see what they were talking about. There were many times I was at a church camp or whatever and I passed out in the spirit, and I don't know what was really going on.
I was gonna ask you, were you ever slain in the spirit? Did you speak in tongues? And what do you make of it now? Because I think so many of us who have deconstructed, I know a couple people who say tongues, it still felt really real to them at the time, and they don't know what to make of it. For me personally, I never felt like it was genuine. I would do it, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, well, nobody's calling me out, so yeah, I guess it's real. But what was it like for you?
I know exactly what you mean. What I have to say is that I was very in it. Like I really bought into it, like wholeheartedly. And I think part of that was just because I was born into it, but also my mother still works in ministry. She's trying to create her own ministry now. My mother has always believed that she has a prophetic gift from God. And so she would prophesy over us in our home a lot. She did she kept a lot of that faith alive in our day-to-day lives, in a way that I don't think, when I spoke to other friends of mine who were raised in church, they didn't always have that same intensity at home as well. But, with my mother, it was always, we're going to pray first. We're going to speak in tongues. We're going to lay hands. We're going to anoint you with oil. We're going to, there was a lot of rituals in our home that really reinforced it. And I was in it. Like, I really believed it. But it's true that like in in hindsight, I'm like, what was I actually thinking? Was I in psychosis? Was I like convincing myself that like speaking in tongues was actually speaking another language? In the moment, it felt real. I think because I was trying with all my might for it to feel real. I was trying to connect to something, and I still think I haven't fully unpacked all of that. It's a complex thing. It changes the way your brain works, and I think even in therapy now, trying to unpack some of the things I experienced, it's like I can't always make sense of it.
No,
even after all these
absolutely.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with groupthink and what you're saying about how you got so much of it at home and at church, and it feels so normalized. So it would feel stranger to not buy into everything that's going on around you. I mean, when you're a kid, you're so impressionable. So if you're told this is reality, this is 100% it, why would you not at that point?
And
But
I have to say that like one of my earliest memories was me having a dream that I went to hell and that I went to heaven after that. And so this is something that
like plucked you out.
Yes.
Oh
so
my
like,
gosh.
This is like, it's hard to know what is memory and what was repeated back to me from my mother, because like my mother always tells this story of how the first time I ever spoke to her in full sentences, I was 4, and I like all of a sudden started telling her about this dream that I had had, and she was just in awe, like crying, because she was like, my daughter is like having these visions from God, but also like I hadn't really spoken. I was really quiet before that, and then suddenly I was speaking, and so she saw this as this like sign of something. But she describes me being like 4 years old, coming to her to tell her about this dream I had where I was in hell in a cage, and like the devil was trying to like give me beer. I don't even know how I knew what beer was.
Oh my
you know
gosh,
what I mean?
at 4 years old.
Right. And it just makes me go, what had I heard already at that point to start having these visions? He was trying to give me beer, and I was like, stop. And then like Jesus came down and pulled me out of hell and like took me to heaven. He got me my favorite ice cream. He pushed me on the swings, and he didn't push me too high. Like there was a whole lore around this dream that I had when I was 4. And I think that really, it sort of like became a part of my journey with faith, is that like from a young age I had this like connection or something, and so
a gift.
And it just reinforced that sort of idea in my home, which is so interesting because my mother was very adamant against things like witchcraft, etc. But as we now know, so many of the practices she was doing were traditions that people have done in witchcraft and brought into Christianity. And, it's like, what's the difference? Like we drink the blood of Jesus.
Absolutely. And I remember, yeah, right. Okay. But I remember at Bethel, which is super charismatic, where I ended up, they would say that it all depends on the source, and that everybody else, like New Age, it's the counterfeit. So of course they're trying to copy us because they're taking the true goodness and they are twisting it. So when I was at Bethel, this was so crazy. They used to encourage the students to go to New Age festivals and set up a booth and do prophetic words and do our own little, well, let's bring what's real here and let's bring the light. But in hindsight, it's so funny looking back at it, because it's like, we're all just doing the same thing, but we think we have it right, as does everybody in religion.
Everyone else. And it's so, as I got older, I started to see it, and we can get to that. But I just think looking back, I'm like, so many of the things we did at home would be considered strange or magical or, very similar ritual wise, anointing me with oil, speaking in tongues. It's like, that's not that unlike a lot of other things that you would call demonic.
So and it's all to do with the source. And going back to the dream. So so you're not sure if you really remember the dream?
It's just like a memory,
you've heard it so many times.
Right. But it's, memory is so complex. And actually, one of the things that helped in my deconstruction was learning a lot about how our brain works and learning about neuroscience. So when I learned about how our memory works, I was like, I don't actually know if I had the dream or if I had just been told that I'd had the dream over and over again. But I do have a visual in my mind of what it looked like in my head. And I do remember the scene in hell and going to heaven and talking to Jesus. And he flew me on like a golden airplane. And I think that sort of story kept me going in times of doubt. I sort of latched onto this thing of like, no, I'm special. Like I've had conversations with God. I've been spoken to, and that sort of thing was very prevalent in my home. Outside of just church life, it was a lot of like, this is a personal thing. You were chosen by God to have these gifts and revelations and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that is especially prevalent in charismatic circles, the idea of being chosen. And I always say it's kind of main character energy to feel like God brought you here and you are going to change the generation. So I can't even imagine being 4 years old and you kind of have this prophetic gift because you have this amazing dream and you're so in tune with God. And of course, as kids, we're going to take that and latch onto that because you're saying I'm worthy, you're saying I'm very connected. And I know that Bethel, they always prioritize the kids a lot. So it was so normal to see the 4 and 5-year-olds speaking in tongues. And they would say, oh, if we can't get breakthrough for healing, let's go get the children's ministry to do it. Because God will listen to the children more than he'll listen to us. And it was very, very interesting. So
that's intense. And so you did speak in tongues growing up as a child?
No. Okay. So I joined this when I was 18. My poor parents. I mean, we were raised it was non-denominational, but it was fundamentalist and evangelical type of situation. And then I found Bethel all on my own. I went to a church conference and started drinking the Kool-Aid, and then I made my way out there. And in my mind, I was like, I know so much more than my parents now. I mean, y'all's Christianity is so boring. I'm out here healing people and
you were like, this is the real stuff.
Yes, I am on a mission. And it felt like everybody else was wrong or missing out. So yeah, that's interesting that you went to different denominations, though, that it wasn't just charismatic. But would you say that the charismatic still was in your household?
Yeah, I think in my deconstruction is when I realized how much of my religious belief had been informed solely by what was going on in my home, between the dynamic with my parents and my mother particularly, and how she reinforced those ideas. I obviously did learn a lot in church, and I went in and out of private and public schools too. So sometimes we were at Christian schools having chapel, stuff like that. Sometimes I was in a public school not having that. So I did get a variety of experiences, but I think the through line was kind of this sort of really intense, like Jesus and God are a part of you every single day. He cares about whether you get a parking space or not. He cares about, you know, stuff like that, down to every little thing. So that was really reinforced in my home outside of what was reinforced in the church. And I wanted it to be. I was very, very devoted. Like I believed it wholeheartedly, and it felt real to me, and I felt that sort of connection. You know, I was the kid at the altar call crying if I had like done something bad that week. I had such a guilty conscience. Like it instilled this thing of God is always watching everything you do, and I'm still undoing some of that hyper vigilant, you know, sort of mental scanning that you learn how to, you know, policing your own thoughts.
Yes, and he reads all your thoughts. So if you're not really sorry, I mean, I would do this mental spin of, I'm sorry, but am I really sorry? Because maybe I wouldn't have done it if I was really sorry, you know, and it's just, ooh.
It's a recipe for a lot of mental health issues. Yes.
Yeah, and I have OCD.
Exactly.
Which runs in my family, but I really do think that this did not help.
100%. I'm in the process of seeing about a diagnosis for myself, because it didn't occur to me until recently that is what I deal with still. And sometimes regular or other types of therapy can exacerbate those symptoms. And I've realized in all my years of therapy that some of the symptoms have gotten worse. And I'm like, do I have OCD and I didn't realize it? Because that would make a lot of sense with some of the things I still struggle with around rumination. And yeah, the church, I mean, it's when you're taught that someone is in your head all the time, scanning every thought you have. I mean, that's a recipe for OCD immediately.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So did you enjoy going to church? So going back to the youth camps, you know, you're on your knees and you're confessing all of these things. Did you enjoy your experience at youth group? Because I know for me, it was a little complicated because I had some really good memories there.
Yeah.
But it was the bulk of my purity culture, religious trauma, I would say.
I think that's why this is so hard to disentangle for a lot of folks, is that there is a lot of beauty in those experiences. And I mean, the emotional outpouring of, you know, the cry nights, you know, it's like that, those are some of my most powerful experiences as a child and a teenager. And yeah, some of it was really beautiful, and the community you build can be really beautiful. And even sometimes the relationship that I had created with, you know, God at the time was, I felt cared for sometimes. But then also the doctrine was teaching something very different. And I think that's what's so complicated, is when you're in an environment where you're taught that like there's this ever loving, omnipresent figure that loves you, and also you're worthless, and you're also like a sinner, and like having those things be taught together creates this cocktail of confusion, really, of just like, what is love then? Because if like the person, if the figure, the God who loves me would allow me to go to hell if I don't serve him, what does that mean about love? And it makes you, it just builds in the confusion. And so I think, thinking back on my experiences, I had a lot of fun, and I also had a lot of stress. I was definitely the one person in my friend group who was always worried about doing something wrong. And I was the goody two shoes. I was the one who was always, you know, guys, let's not get in trouble. You know, I would tell on myself if I did something wrong. And, you know, it just, I was annoying to some people. I definitely had
That's so me though. I'm a worrier. So my cousins and my family, they were always like, Jubilee's the worry wart, because I'd be like, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. And very similar.
Same. But it was, I thought I was doing the right thing. It wasn't even out of my own. It was just me afraid there was going to be catastrophe if we did the wrong thing, or if I sinned in some way. And so, it was, I would say I have positive memories of, I don't know, I guess partly positive memories because I was rewarded for being so faithful. So I guess in a weird way, it's like, I got this positive reinforcement because I was so devoted, and I was the goody two shoes, and I didn't kiss boys, and I didn't do drugs, and I like did all the things. But then that creates such a high standard that I did start to feel like it was impossible to keep that standard. And it's complicated. It's really complicated. I think probably my best memories, I would say, were my own sort of individual, like spiritual experiences, which I think were just for me, the times when I really did feel sad and alone and I prayed and I felt better, or, times like that where I felt like God pushed through and helped me through a hard time. But the times that are not so great are, they outweigh those times, unfortunately. And it's hard. Trauma is real.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's everything you've ever known, I mean, whew. So when did things start to change? You said your dad started to get famous, and then somehow you guys were approached to have a TV show, which is crazy.
Yeah. So my dad started working when I was like maybe 10 or 11, and then he started to really get well known when I was like 13, 14. And then throughout high school, he was on a TV show called Everybody Hates Chris, which became a pretty big hit. And then, right when I started, I went to Azusa Pacific University for my first 2 years of college.
I looked into that because my parents, which, I mean, I'm grateful that they offered to pay for college, but they had told us, here's a list of 100 something Christian schools, and you have to pick one, and we'll pay for that one, but nothing else, right? Or community college, they would also pay for that. So, Azusa Pacific, it was up there for me because I was like, it's near the beach, right? I mean, or something.
So not exactly,
nice.
but what's funny is that they call it Azusa Pacific. It's not that close to the beach, but it is like within a couple hours of the beach. So I guess if you hadn't lived in California, it's closer to the beach than if you weren't in California.
Maybe it was just like California. Yeah, what would that be like to go?
For sure. I graduated from a Christian high school, and a lot of people from my high school had gone to APU. A lot of my teachers had gone to APU and came back to our high school to teach. So there was a lot of like funneling to APU there. And initially, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go to college because I always knew I wanted to be an actress. But I ended up at APU honestly because I was like, I was too scared to like go further, to be totally honest. I was just kind of like, a lot of my friends are going. I know people in the theater department there. Like, I might as well just like, do that for now. And while I was at APU is when our family got approached to do a reality show. And it was interesting because my father was, an actor at the time, but reality TV didn't really feel like the right move for him. But at the time, BET really wanted to create this like more wholesome image. So they really like pitched it to us like, you guys you're not going to be tacky like, those other reality shows. You're going to be this like wholesome Christian family. And so they were like, sure. And so they agreed to do it. And so we did 2 seasons of that show from 2009 to 2011. And those were very interesting experiences because now, yes, I was already this sort of goody two-shoes Christian girl, but we were also in Hollywood. So like there is some complication there. There are some people who don't believe that, Christians should even be in Hollywood. So like we were trying to present this image of like, you can still be a Christian and be in Hollywood. And,
here's how you do it. We're the model.
Exactly.
And like, that.
My dad is known for being shirtless half the time. Like that's kind of a part of his brand is his bouncing his pecs and showing his body. So like, I think it probably sent a mixed message. I don't know. Like, I think it's interesting to look at it in hindsight and try to unpack it because, like, there is this element of my dad's career that was all about his body and all this stuff. But then also, like, we did this show where we were all super Christian and, like, we were trying to show that you can have it both ways, which I think probably led to some confusion for me, too, because I was like, what does it mean to be a Christian in this industry? And what lines do I cross? What lines do I not cross? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, yes, that's how we ended up on the show. And
how did they even know that he was a Christian? Was he doing interviews and talking about that? Why would they even approach him about doing that?
Yeah, I think at the time he was talking about it pretty openly, and he was pretty well known at our church at this time. Our church was, we went to Faith Community Church in West Covina, which it's changed a lot since then, but it was run by Dr. Jim Reeve, and we were really close with the pastor and his wife, and so we became kind of like celebrities at the church even. Like we were often, kind of sitting up in the front and we had our little section and all that because it got to a point where if my dad walked through the church to leave, he would get like surrounded by fans. Yeah. So it was, so that I think became a part of his image was like, I'm this family man. I'm this, Christian man, and I'm in Hollywood and I do this to be silly, but I'm also this family guy. And part of our show was that was the introduction, I guess, to that, because at that point he was mostly known for just a couple things, and then that show was really introducing the world to like our family as a whole.
Yeah. How many siblings did you have? And were all of the kids on board? Because I look at my family and I think, I don't know that all of us would have been like, yes, let's do this. Because we have some that are shyer and more outgoing. So what was that like?
Yeah, initially, I don't think, well, so my younger siblings are a lot younger than me. There's 5 of us. So me and my older sister I was like 18 or 19. She was like 23, 22, and then my younger siblings were all like elementary school aged, and my brother was only 5. He hadn't even started kindergarten yet. So they were so young that they didn't even really understand what was happening. But because my father had been in this industry for a while and we'd kind of spent our life kind of being on sets and stuff, we felt like we had a pretty good, we weren't just like being plucked out of obscurity, and like we got asked a couple questions about that. Like, how do you feel putting your family on TV in a time like this? Because like John and Kate plus 8 were on TV, and like, there was a lot of that stuff going on, and my
show was such a mess.
Exactly. And we were like, that's not why we're here. Like, we made it a whole point to be like, we're here to just be a normal family on TV and not do like this weird manufactured crazy drama and like tabloid scandal stuff. So my siblings, as far as I can tell, were fine, but they were so young. I was eager because I thought maybe this could like open the door for me in the industry somehow. So I was like, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, going back as well, what were you feeling like you wanted to do at that time? What were your dreams going into college?
Yeah, I wanted to be an actor. I've known that I wanted to be an actor since before my dad actually became an actor, which is something I talk about in my content a little bit, is that the joke in our family was always that like I was the real actress of the family, because for one thing, my mother studied acting and musical theater in college. And then I was a singer and an actress and a dancer. And then my dad sort of fell into this career. And so me and my mom were like, how did you end up getting the career? Like we were the ones that wanted to do it. Yeah, exactly. But it was cool because it was like, now we get to like have opportunities and maybe it can open some doors. So I trained as an actor all throughout high school. I studied musical theater, and that's what I went to college was for theater. And so at this time I was training and basically just wanting to make my mark in the entertainment industry. So when the opportunity came for the reality show, I was excited because I thought exposure, it'll just give me an opportunity to get out there. But the actual experience of reality TV was more complicated than I thought it would be. It's really not. I think it's because like I'm comfortable acting, but like being set up to do a scene and then having to be myself was like somehow more weird to me. It was like I had to act as myself. And I found it to be so uncomfortable that first season. It was like really hard for me to relax and to just be myself, because I felt like I was playing a character of myself. It was such a strange feeling. So that's how we ended up on TV, and that's how I was excited about it, but it was a strange experience for sure.
Yeah. So as acting as yourself, did they sit you down and tell you what the scene was going to be about? Like, this is the topic that we're talking about this episode, or did it feel pretty like normal and relaxed?
I would say our show was pretty orchestrated.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was because, again, we were trying to present a pretty squeaky clean image. So they weren't trying to follow us around like documentary style. They were trying to set up like what was basically a family sitcom type of situations.
Yeah.
But I always say that we never did anything that we wouldn't do in real life, but we definitely set up the scenes to kind of create the comedy or whatever. So there was definitely a lot of conversations about like story arcs and like what is the journey that you're going to take this season, and that's how in season 1 I ended up being asked like, okay, so are you dating? Because you're hitting that 18-year-old demographic, so we want to see what your dating life is like. And I was like, I've never been on a date before.
Oh my gosh, you hadn't. So what was the cause of that? You were just not thinking about it and trying to stay pure, or why had you not been on a date?
Man, It's a little bit of both, I think. It was like I was trying to stay pure, but I was also really shy and like genuinely afraid to ever tell anyone that I liked them. So even when I got old enough to date, which my parents allowed me to date around 16 or 17, I just never did anything about it. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
if I liked somebody, I was too scared to talk to them about it. I would just be their friend and like, hope that one day they notice me. It's funny because I was actually pretty popular in high school. I did a lot of theater, so I had a lot of friends in different circles, but I just didn't get asked out. And I was too nervous to ever confess how I felt to anyone, so I just never went out with anybody. I had a lot of unrequited love, a lot of people that I was like pining after in high school who like just never found out.
I was the queen of pining.
I think a lot of like religious girls were, I think.
Yes, because
Yeah.
you build it up in your mind. I know at my youth group, they had us make a list of everything that you want in your future husband. So if I saw a guy and I thought he matched everything, I was like, this is it. What if you're my husband? And that was such the vibe, is that anybody could be your future husband.
Yep.
So.
It always jumped to future husband. And I think that's why I couldn't just relax and like ask someone out. Because in my mind, I was like, is this going to be my future husband? Or is it
Yeah,
just
and don't
jumped
waste
to
your
that.
time if it's not your husband. I've heard that from so many people that they didn't date into their 30s because
Yeah.
they were just like,
Yeah.
I was just waiting for the right one, to the point where I kind of turned everybody away if I saw any,
Yeah.
I don't know, not red flag, but if they weren't exactly perfect, they wouldn't go on any dates at all.
It really built up the fantasy in my head of like this perfect Christian man who was going to come into my life. Yes. And like, I don't know, just kind of, I remember in high school reading that book, Redeeming Love.
Oh my God. I read that too.
And I was so touched by it. I was like, I need a guy just
sure.
like him. Like, that was my fantasy. I wanted this like beautiful Christian man who would just stand by me and God and all these things. And that's not even a thing to begin with.
No, I know. In that book specifically, oh my gosh, I wept. I thought that this
Yeah.
man was everything.
Yeah, me too.
I'm trying to remember what happens in that book. I know it's based on the Bible. Yeah, it's
I know
not
it's
great.
The
in hindsight.
female character, she's like a sex worker, but like
And
he
goes and
saves
buys her, doesn't he?
I'm pretty sure that's what happens. He like buys her to save her from this life, and like it's this whole
And
thing.
he's like, I don't care that you are a sex worker. And she's like, oh my gosh, you would love someone as horrible as me.
Exactly.
And I was like,
Yep.
oh, the dream.
Exactly. What
Love
a great
me for
man.
being such a sinner, Oh my gosh, yeah. But I'm sure that book has not aged well. I know when the movie came out, a bunch of people were tagging me and asking me, oh my gosh, did you see? And I didn't say anything because I'm like, I don't think you guys want to know my thoughts on that book now. But.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's funny because back then, I was an actress and stuff, and I remember and a writer, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, I'm gonna write an adaptation of this. This would make such a good movie one day. And then when I saw they did make a movie, I was like, by that point, I was like, oh my God, why did they make this movie?
That's crazy. Yeah, so they approached you and they're saying, so have you been on a date? So what did you tell them and what did they end up wanting to do?
So I told them that I had literally never been on a date, and they were like, really? Like, this is perfect.
Yes, reality TV, let's do it.
They said, this is gold. So we'll have you go on your first date on camera. And I was like, like, I immediately just was like, why did I agree to this? Why did I tell them this? But then I thought, well, maybe this could be good. Like, I remember talking about it with my friends, like maybe this will be the way that I met my husband. Like, who knows? Like, maybe God has
So
this
sweet.
part of the plan. Maybe this random person they introduce me to is going to be my man. But basically we did a whole story. This is the fake part of reality TV. And again, I can't speak for all reality TV because some shows I know are more realistic. But ours was, they basically decided that me and my 3 friends, they were going to have one of my friends pretend that she met this guy while she was out and was like, I think he'd be great for you. So they had my friend Janae be like, this guy James, he's really cute, he's really tall, and I just think you guys would be great together. And she never met him, like, ever.
Okay, so she got her acting going
Yep, she
on
did.
there.
She did. All my friends who did this with me were theater people, so they were like they were all on board
Love
with
it.
it. Yeah. So we pretended that she had met this guy and that she was going to set me up on a blind date, and then before the blind date, oh my gosh, they had my father come to our fake apartment where me and my roommates were living, and they had him do a whole speech about like men care about sex, and here's how you got to protect yourselves against
like a sit down dad talk about for your first date, because of course you're going to be having sex on your first date ever.
It was. I mean, to be honest, it made for funny TV to have
I'm sure.
Terry Crews up there telling all these girls, men care about sex, and here's how you got to protect yourself, and da da da. And we were just like, okay, like. And then the next episode was my date, and then they had my family show up before my date to like ruin it, and like, it was.
Did you know that they were gonna show up?
Yes.
Or did they try to catch you off guard? Yeah.
I did know, but the thing is, I was actually so insanely nervous because I still had never met this guy, and I didn't know if this guy was actually interested in me or not. Like I think it was just the muddiness of reality TV is that sometimes things are set up and sometimes they're not. Like sometimes they're real and sometimes they're like real with like a little bit of like set up, and so it's kind of hard to know like what was real and what wasn't at that time. And I just remember thinking like, I know that they cast a guy for this, but like, is he actually interested in me? Like, did he show him a picture of me? Like, I literally knew nothing about this person, and so I was genuinely nervous that I had to go be on this date with this person and I didn't know anything about them. And so then when my family comes to do the bit, I wasn't acting really. I was actually genuinely like, the guy's gonna be here any minute and I'm really scared. And like,
oh my God.
all those emotions were very, very real. Even though we planned it, it was real for me because I had literally never been on a date with a man. And so it was just like, I didn't know what to expect.
No, that's scary, because I would be thinking, okay, am I about to meet my future husband, or am I about to meet an actor who doesn't want to date me at all? Because I could see a world where they would say casting people who want to meet somebody.
Right.
So you don't know if, okay, is he actually looking for a relationship, or is this guy just cast for this role?
I had no idea. No idea.
So awkward.
And even as it happened, I had no idea. Like, he comes in the room, I see him for the first time. I'm like, hi, hello. He's meeting my family for the first time, and it's all happening for real. Like, that scene was done without any prep. Like, that was all real and like genuinely nerve-wracking for me, because I'm like, does he like me? Does he think I'm cute? Do I think he's cute? Because like, I don't know. And meanwhile, I was also, at this point, I had already been crushing on one of the PAs who was working on our show. So he was working the background of this while I was like on this fake date. And I was like, I think I like the PA more than I like the guy I'm on a date with, but like, is this guy here for me or not? Like, so many things were going on in my head.
That's so embarrassing.
It was a lot. It was very embarrassing. And and also,
I'd be looking at the PA the whole time.
I was
being like, no, this isn't real. You and me, though.
Right, exactly. I'm like, this is pretend. Like, I'm really about you,
Yeah.
And my friends knew that too. So they were like, they were excited for me. They were like, maybe this guy you're meeting on a date can be for you. Maybe the PA is, who knows? And like, I told that story on my TikTok that eventually I did end up dating the PA. He became the first guy that I dated for real after this experience. so it was a crazy turn of events, actually. But yeah, I mean, as someone who, had grown up, I don't know if I ever call myself sheltered, because like, I did see a lot of the world. Like, I was a Christian, I was goody two shoes. I definitely like had those sort of parameters, but I wouldn't call myself sheltered, because I did get to experience a lot of things, especially having a dad who worked in Hollywood. And so I think for me, my love life had always been the thing that I had never done anything. I never held hands with a boy. I never done it. Never even told a boy, I like you. Like, that was the biggest and scariest thing to me. And so to have that happen on TV in hindsight is actually pretty crazy that like, that we did that.
Yeah. So how did the date go? And then did you guys just never talk again? Is that when you realized that this wasn't going to go anywhere?
I think I realized it when so they had us go bowling, and he was really sweet, like off camera and on, but we had just met. So I was like, I can't tell if this is a thing or not. Like, I really was unsure. And then while we were eating food during the bowling scene, there was a point where he was like, yeah, I really want to get into acting and filmmaking. And I was like, I think he's probably here for like a big break more than he is for me. And like, just something in my head was like, I don't think this is a thing, but like, he's really nice, and maybe we can work together, like.
And maybe he's like, maybe your dad can get me.
Exactly. That's probably why he was there. And good for him, honestly. I would do it too.
That's so how it is. I don't know if you've seen any of my other TikToks, but I was a background actor in Atlanta.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
And like at one time I was a celebrity nanny for somebody who was out there filming and stuff. So I know
cool.
it's so the vibe to try to network, because that's the whole thing. You have to network, you have to put yourself out there. So I'm not surprised that he's like, also, by the way, I'm trying to get into the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, you came to the right place.
Yeah, well, you're here.
You're here now, so good for you. And he is an actor now, and he's a filmmaker, and he does great. And he's gay, and I'm gay, so it all worked out for the best in the end. It all worked out. Oh my gosh,
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what was the next? You had that storyline about your first date, and then you said you had a storyline about you pledging your purity. Yes. On the TV show as well. So what the heck was that?
Yeah. So season 1 was the first date, and then season 2, I did go on another date in season 2, and this was another sort of setup thing. But that one was more easy because I knew I by the time I got to season 2, I kind of knew that it was more of like an acting job than like a real thing. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on this fake date and do this thing, and it's fine. And by that point, I had dated people, so I wasn't so anxious about that. But they chose to, this is so uncomfortable to talk about. My younger sister, they chose to make part of her story that she had just gotten her cycle for the first time. Which
oh my gosh, that makes me want to die. I can't imagine.
It's something TV that I want to leave up to her to talk about her experience, because that was her experience. But like, I was a part of that storyline, so they had it so like she sort of like, my parents are out of town, and like I'm the one there for her when this happens. And
you big sistered her
through
her first period.
Yeah. And so, but then because of that, they decided the next episode would be this purity ball, because now that she's a woman. Exactly.
Oh, that's so much worse than I thought.
Yeah,
to have it be
it's pretty bad.
She got her period, now it's time for that's
purity.
Atrocious.
Yeah, it is. It's very icky in hindsight. And at the time, it was like, this was normalized in my community, in my family, to be like, okay, you're a woman now, so these things need to happen. And I can't remember whose idea it was to do the purity ball, but I know that they wanted to specifically, because purity balls had become a thing, but I think they wanted to show them in a Black community because maybe it wasn't as common. And so they got a bunch of women together, a bunch of young girls, all Black girls. And this, she's a former actress who actually like led the purity ball, and which I thought was really interesting. Again, it was this sort of merging. So was
she
of like,
a pastor, or she's an actress who's doing a purity ball?
She was an actress who ran these events for young women, and so I guess they sort of formulated a purity ball out of it. Like, I don't think it was a thing they did very often. I think it was like they knew that this woman had did work in this area of like mentorship of young women, and so then brought her into it. And so we went to this hotel ballroom and did this purity ball, and like,
were you wearing white?
I was not. I was not wearing white. A lot of the girls there were. I know they didn't do the full, because I've seen some of how crazy some of these purity balls can get. It was not as like traditional in that sense. It wasn't quite like that, but it was. I mean, we still got up there and like held our little ring and said like, I'm not going to give a boyfriend wife privileges, and we pledged it to our father and to God.
And why the father? This is what always gets me. I had someone on recently where her dad proposed to her. They would do these weekend retreats where they would have you bond over the week, and then at the end they would kind of propose to you with this purity ring, and it's like, but why? I mean, even if we were going to push these purity standards on, you would hope it would be conversations you're having with your mom, not pledging to your father, because it's as if your father owns you before you get passed off to another man. It's
so disgusting in hindsight, and as I was living it, it had been framed as loving, as like your father protects you and he protects your virtue, and like it was not presented as something creepy. It was presented like, you need a man like your father to protect your virtue from these disgusting men who want to take your purity. And then, you know, when you're ready, he'll give you to the right man. And like, it was presented as this very heroic, like, just this disgusting
he's guarding your
fantasy.
Heart and your virtue for you.
Yeah. And yeah, it was gross. It was gross. Like but I was fully in it at that time. I had bought my own purity ring prior to that because I was so devoted. I was like, I want to have one, you know, and I bought my own ring. And when I did the ball, I remember thinking, what a nice, exciting thing. I can be a positive influence on all these young girls. And, you know, and also at the time, like celebrities like the Jonas Brothers and Selena Gomez, they were all talking about the purity ring thing. So it was actually kind of popular. Like,
it was in the media at the time because I think, how old are you? Because I'm
34.
Yeah, so I'm 31. We're very similar in there. And I remember the Jonas Brothers having their purity ring. It was all the rage at the time, and it was kind of cool to own that. So, yeah. Did you read any purity culture books growing up or anything like that?
I did. So I never fully read I Kissed Dating Goodbye, but I know that was a really big one for a lot of folks.
I was on his podcast recently.
Really?
Did you know that he's deconstructing now?
I did see that. And I saw that he's been, for some time now, he's been like speaking out about that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Oh, it's horrible though. That book, I was doing a cringe book club where I read his book and was making fun of it because it's like, when you get married, there's going to be a line of all the people you've been with at the altar with you. That's just haunting your wedding day.
That's a very salient image
to
put into someone's mind. Yeah, that's intense. It's intense. I mean, I read a book called Going AWOL, and it was called, but the AWOL meant abstinence without lust.
Ooh.
And it was written, I don't think it was a very popular book. It was written by someone that my parents knew, actually. It was like a friend of a friend or something who wrote this book, and I remember reading it. And I read it a lot because he talked about this journey it was a man writing the book about his journey, finding his wife and blah, blah, blah. And one part that stands out to me is that this, he talked about this time where he was alone with his wife and she was laying on his lap. Like her head was like on his lap.
Yeah.
And he cites this moment as a moment where he really felt like he was like really in it for God because he didn't have the desire to do anything sexual with her.
Oh.
And it was like, and he was like applauding himself for like withholding because like he was like, how nice is it that I can make her feel safe laying on my lap without wanting anything sexual from her. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that's romantic, that's how I should feel. But then now I'm like, wait, what the hell? Like,
yeah I'm so like, so
strange.
what were you thinking before? You know?
What were you thinking before? And also like the way that they demonize normal sexual desire.
There's like nothing wrong with having like, normal feelings.
You can respect someone and love them and desire them sexually. Both. Yeah, instead of doing this like Madonna horror complex of
so
like
crazy.
Yeah, like if I desire you sexually, then I can't respect you, or like that's the underlying message of it all. And it's all kind of framed in this like very like flowery language around like protecting their virtue and all this stuff, but it's really demeaning, and it really I feel like it fractures women into these different types of people. It's like you're either this girl or you're that girl. You're not all of them, and you're not allowed to be a sexual being until you're supposed to be a sexual being, but only in the right context, and somehow you're supposed to know how to do it all without looking at porn, or it's like all these
I love
things.
that you said that, because that's the perfect way to phrase it. I haven't heard someone say that, but fracturing you into different sectors, because here you are where your identity becomes being pure, being modest, and then you get married and you're supposed to be the exact opposite. And then the guys are setting themselves up so much to just have the wife that is going to want to have sex with them 24/7, because they have been told, if you wait until marriage, you're going to get to have all the sex you want. And yeah, it's like, who am I when you get married?
Yeah.
Because purity is such a core part of you that you've demonized all sexuality at that point. So everything feels dirty and wrong.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I know for myself, just to be candid, anytime I would masturbate or do anything normal,
Yeah.
as a child or a teenager, I would cry, I would repent. And like that kind of like that reinforcement in my body, it led to things in my body that I still have not been able to really recover from fully. I still have a lot of work to do in sort of releasing my body from the shame of pleasure and desire, which is just a normal, healthy thing to have. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. It's like we all, well, not all, some people are asexual, but it's
Yeah.
things the majority of us deal with, but
Right.
we are made to feel like there's something really broken about us and it's very shameful. So were you at all embarrassed doing this on TV? Like you're in college, were you embarrassed at all? Or were you just solely feeling like I'm going to be the biggest inspiration ever for my generation?
It's funny because as I think back on it, I do think I had a little twinge of embarrassment, maybe because I knew that there were going to be people who would think it was like silly or, because that is what I encountered. I like a lot of my friends had sex at this point. Like I had a lot of Christian friends, but I also did have people who were more, open, and I knew that I was I was more rare, I guess, to be my age, 18, 19 years old, pledging my purity openly like that. But I think I talked myself out of it because I was like, I'm doing this for God, I'm doing it to show the image of God that I had been raised to believe. So but in hindsight, I do think I did feel a little like,
Just like, oh, we're doing this.
yeah, a little awkwardness, a little discomfort around it, but telling myself we're doing this, we're gonna set a good example for the girls and for young women, and so that's how I chalked it up to that.
Yeah. Was there anything else that happened on the show that revolved around these sorts of topics, or was that the two big ones?
Those were the two big ones for sure. And then I eventually moved to New York. Part of my arc on season 2 was that I got into NYU. And so I feel like there were probably some conversations had around like, don't like lose your faith going to New York.
Because New York is full of sinners.
It's really funny. This didn't happen on my show, but I do remember the wife of our pastor telling a story about how this girl they knew like moved to New York and now she's a lesbian. And I'm like,
The horror.
And here I am like, anyway, here's my girlfriend.
No, right? You're like, I made you proud.
I did. I sure did. And it's, I mean, and that's actually how I met my girlfriend. Is she also grew up religious and now does work in the deconstruction space. And so
awesome.
She also has similar stories of like people telling her, you're going to go off and become a sinner. And she's like, oops,
Oops.
Yeah.
Well, they always say that, especially when it comes to college. Honestly, they say you're going to go off to college and you're going to change. You're going to be brainwashed by the world. And unfortunately, what I have realized is getting educated and learning how to ask hard questions. That's what leads to a lot of people's deconstruction.
100%.
And also just being around people who are different than you.
Yes.
When my ex and I was involved in Bethel, and then I did an internship abroad that was connected to Bethel. Then I got married, and he's 10 years older than me. And
Wow.
it was just the worst. And then we moved to Atlanta because he thought that he was going to be a famous director and was going to own the entire company of Disney, which is
Okay.
not possible. No, he did not live on this earth. He was a very interesting man. So, we're out in Atlanta, and this was the first time, because I had not gone to college, that I was around people who were different than me. And spending 15-hour days on sets with people who were not religious, people who were gay, people who had different ideas than me. And you have so much downtime on sets where, I would get deep. I'm just kind of like that. I like talking about serious things. So we would sit and talk about our deepest traumas for 5 hours while we were in extras holding. And that's what really started a lot of my deconstruction. So I feel like that was kind of my college experience that they warn about, was me being on sets.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's a lot of people's story. I mean, going to NYU absolutely changed the course of my life. And not just going to that college, but moving to New York, moving across the country from my entire family, and finally having like my own autonomy and like my own sort of I mean, so many things happened in that first year alone. I was on my own in the city. I was obviously in this really intensive program, but also I fell in love for the first time. I actually had a relationship where I felt like tempted for the first time.
Yeah.
And I actually realized, like, wow, what does it feel like when you're in love and you want to be physical with someone? That doesn't feel sinful. And that started to slowly shift my perspective. But then, of course, I had, guilt whiplash from that. I thought, oh, I'm just backsliding now. And I had a lot of back and forth while I was in college. But I think when I look back, a few years after, let me think. I started at NYU in 2010, and then by 2013, I had taken a leave of absence for mental health reasons. I was under a lot of mental health stress, and I just took a leave of absence. I just couldn't do it. And I had also gone through a traumatic breakup with that first boyfriend. And so I was just in a space of rededicating my life to God, actually. I was very, like, I was binging Joyce Meyer like you've never seen. I read like all her books, Battlefield of the Mind and Power Thoughts. And I was really consuming a lot of like self-help evangelical content. And I got very obsessed with losing weight. And this is something that has been a part of my life from when I was very young. Naturally, my father is a very fit, muscular man known for his body. And the correlation between like diet culture and religion had always kind of been intertwined in my home.
Yeah.
And
it is in a lot of circles.
A lot. It's extremely
the
prevalent.
Church will put on diets.
Yeah.
I saw it all the time.
Yeah, because it's another form of sin. It's gluttony, it's this, it's that, it's self-control, it's all these things. And I got very obsessed in this time with trying to lose weight and trying to eat clean, and I ended up in an eating disorder program. And the eating disorder program is what I look back at now and I go, that really started my deconstruction, because just starting to unpack diet culture and being in therapy all day, every day, unpacking the childhood trauma, the stuff with my parents, all that stuff really started to change my mind. It made me a stronger feminist. And then I went back to NYU and like took more classes on all these different things. And my mind just started to expand and blossom. And it just started to be like, I don't think I can call myself this anymore. Like it just started to happen. It wasn't really an intentional thing. In fact, I think most people who deconstruct feel like they're trying to become better Christians. Like they're often trying to get to a more honest version of their faith, and they end up like leaving it.
Yeah. And there's one girl, I'm going to have her on at some point, but she's said that numerous times, where it was her really studying the Bible at the time, because she just wanted to be the best Christian she could. She was a worship leader. And the more that she researched it, the more it all kind of fell apart for her. And I've heard it said so many times, and I agree with it, that it doesn't necessarily feel like deconstruction is something that you always jump into.
Yeah.
It feels like it's something that happens to you
100%.
In a way. So
I completely agree with that. I felt like it happened to me without me even realizing it. Like before I knew it, the foundations of what I had built my whole life on were no longer relevant. And I just kind of looked up one day and was like, oh, I don't believe this. Like, and it really, it like felt like the floor dropped out beneath me when I had that moment, because I wasn't intending to not believe anymore. That was not the plan. And I think that's why when people say that people like leave the church and deconstruct because they want to sin, it makes me so furious, because I wanted nothing more than to just be the best version of a Christian that I could be. And it led me to not being one. And I was like, that wasn't part of the plan. And it was scary to feel like everything I had built my whole life on was not what I couldn't believe it anymore. It wasn't even that I didn't want to, I just couldn't.
yeah.
And I will also say that during this time, I listened to the Liturgist podcast, which it was a pretty popular podcast at that time, between like, I guess like 2013, 2016, 17. I listened to a lot of that podcast, which was hosted by two guys who left their faith and kind of came back to it. And that's when I first heard the term deconstruction. I didn't even know that that's what I was really doing. I just thought, like, again, we're just learning how to be better Christians in this crazy climate. And like, as politics are starting to get more interesting, you know, a lot of folks, I think.
Interesting to say the least.
Exactly. Around 2016, I think a lot of people, that was their like hard line of like, I can't call myself Christian anymore, and align myself with this particular movement. So yeah, it was a long process that was very complex. It kind of unraveled slowly over really like almost a decade of like stuff. And in some extent, I am still sort of figuring it out. But I would say around 2016 is around the time that I was like, I don't think I can call myself this anymore. And it was scary. It was hard. It definitely was not easy. I don't know what it was like for you, if you felt that floor dropping out beneath you feeling, but I think for me it came when I realized that I didn't know what I believed about like the afterlife, because my grandmother had passed away, who I loved dearly, just a couple years before, and like suddenly I had this thought of like, what if I never see her again? Like all these things that people who aren't raised religious probably think about a lot younger started hitting me in my 20s, because it was like, I never even considered that. We're going to heaven. Like, that's it.
Yeah, like, you just accepted that it was a given.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that really, it pulled the ground out from under me. Yeah.
Yeah. Were there any specific things that while you were deconstructing, like beliefs that you deconstructed, that you started to feel like they didn't make sense in that journey?
Yeah, I think one of the earlier ones was definitely a lot of the stuff around, a lot of the patriarchal stuff. You know, It was like, I realized like, okay, religion is a tool for men to control women. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, a lot of this stuff is not real. It's not even necessarily biblical even sometimes. It's like a lot of pastors just take what they want and make it something, and then everyone listens to that. And I was like, no. Like, and even Christian evangelical women talk about this. Like, even women who espouse a lot of these beliefs talk about the sexism they face. And I think that's kind of where it started for me, was like sexism, feminism, and patriarchy and all that. And then LGBTQ issues, you know, gay marriage was legalized around this time. And I just remember being so happy. And I was like, I can't fathom a world where that's wrong. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like I just started to, my ethics started to shift from, you need to be told what's right and wrong, to what is actually causing harm. And like,
like what's harmful about it? Why do I actually, or why did I potentially think that was wrong? Yeah.
And it's like, it's only harmful because someone told me it was harmful. Like, what I see in front of me are beautiful, wonderful queer people who are in loving, beautiful relationships. There's no harm there. Like, it just started to become very obvious to me, that like, I was taught these things for a reason, for an agenda. And so those things, and then obviously I had been raised, again, I'm a Black woman, but I was in and out of white spaces, Black spaces, mixed spaces. And I think the rise of Christian nationalism started to really illuminate how much of this is like, this has never been for us. Like, and obviously the Black church is its own thing, but it also has its own sort of beliefs that came out of, you know, slavery, that like they didn't want us a part of it back then either. Like, you know, it was like, we had our own journey with that to begin with, and the Black church has its own issues, of course, too. But I think I started to see that divide of like, I don't want to be aligned with this like white evangelical nonsense anymore. Like, what the hell was that? And like, it just started to feel so much more political and so much more of like an agenda than a real true belief system. And that started to really crumble for me around like, you know, 2015, 2016. And I came into racial consciousness in a new way. Because I had been so Christian, I had always been a proud Black woman, but I had always felt like, well, I'm a Christian though, like that's the thing. And I hadn't really engaged with my Blackness in the same way, because I had been so devoted to calling myself a Christian over anything else. And in hindsight, that's probably the thing I'm the most like, when I look back at my younger self, I'm like, girl, you were in the sunken place. You did not understand.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your experience like with your friends at this time? So obviously, you know, you said you did have some friends who were sleeping with their boyfriends and stuff like that. So maybe they weren't all so rigid, but were some of them, and how was that? Did you have anybody who was concerned about you at that time?
You know, I think the people who were most concerned about me were probably my family, like my parents, my mother in particular, because I think one thing that probably made deconstruction a little easier for me is that I was not currently, like at the time, I was not in a church community really. I was in New York. I had stopped going to church and was just kind of doing my own thing. And so I think that made it a little easier to follow my own path because I didn't have this community that was trying to keep me caged in. A lot of the people in my community were not Christians anymore because a lot of my friends I made from school just were not Christians. They were very respectful of my beliefs, but they were not Christians themselves. And so that slowly started to make me realize, like, obviously how diverse the world can be. And I didn't have that sort of fear that I was going to lose everything if I left my faith. And I think I credit that actually to helping me because it made me feel like I didn't feel like I was leaving a cult, so to speak. I felt like I'm already out in the world now. And like, yeah, some of that shit I grew up with was pretty culty, but now I'm like in the world and I feel safe here and it's fine. But the people who were probably the most concerned were my parents or my mother. And I didn't tell my mother about my deconstruction until fairly recently, actually. Like, wow. She suspected it, you know, like she could tell that like I wasn't really about it the way I used to be, but I didn't really like come out in that way until, I don't know, maybe 2020, 2021, like until like I was
I'm
like
sure
30.
That was hard.
Yeah.
I'm sure those conversations can be very difficult, you know, especially when you gained so much of your worth as a young child from that, of being the golden child, not necessarily against your siblings, but, you know, the golden child as far as you are following the rules. You're the one who didn't date. You had your first date on TV, you know, and then now, oh my gosh, you went off to NYU and worse for you realized, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and again, I think living away from my family was really essential for me being able to forge that identity because I didn't have to sit in that like discord in a physical space. You know, I was able to just like be out here, do my thing and like, yeah, sometimes suffer with the weight of all of that and like knowing that they were unhappy with me in some ways. But I got to just live my life and be surrounded by really affirming people. And that changed everything. I think I wouldn't have been able to get there had I stayed in my community and not left and done my own thing. Which I think is really important if you're going to deconstruct, because I think losing your community is often the reason it takes people so long to get out.
Yeah. So to have a backup community or, you know, in
make
advance,
other friends.
Make other friends. Cause that's something people ask a lot of advice, you know, what do I do at the beginning of deconstruction? I mean, I would just make friends outside of that, you know, because it can be jarring to feel like you have lost a lot of people at one time, you know, and I'm thankful that when I was in Atlanta, luckily I had already made other friends and we had been out of the cult atmosphere. We were attending church, but it wasn't so much what it had been before. Because I can't even imagine trying to leave that marriage and that situation if we were still living at Bethel or in Harrisburg. That would have been so crazy.
It is. And to that end, I think that part of what also helped me come into this was being in romantic partnerships with people who were not religious. It sort of was like a journey I had over time. I went from like progressively less religious in my partners. And my one of my exes, he was very non-religious at all. And in fact, when we first like started dating, I remember telling him like, I think I'm going to like you too much. I can't like you because I need to be with a Christian.
Like, you're not the one.
You're not it. And his response to that was like, that's understandable, you know, whatever, but you didn't even ask me what I believe. You think I'm a heathen or something, you know? And he like made a joke about it. And I remember thinking the way he responded to that was actually so kind. And like, that made me want to like hang out with him more because I was like, okay, here's someone who isn't going to judge me at least for what I believe. And we can laugh about it and it's fine. And I would say I credit him somewhat as being a big support system throughout my deconstruction, because he was someone who had never really bought into that. And he was just a decent person. Like, he just believed in going to donate money to the homeless because you should. And, you know, he really modeled for me what it looked like to not have faith and still be a person of like good moral character. And like, so it was nice to have an example of that, because, you know, having been raised in church, you're just taught that like atheists and people out there are just sinners, and they, you know, all these things that are just so not true. Like, but I needed to see it firsthand, you know?
Yeah. You think that Christians own morality, you know, that they own helping people, which, oh, wow, let's talk about helping people in politics and all that stuff, you know, but and no, but it's so true that I remember feeling like they don't have what we have. We have the kindness, the compassion, and all of that. So I think that making friends with people outside of that circle and seeing that that's not true. I know for me, my high school boyfriend that I had been with for like a year, he was an atheist, so that's actually why we broke up, because I was like, I can't be with you because, you know,
been there, girl, been there.
You're an atheist, we're never going to be together, I'm going to go join a cult instead, you know. But I mean, he was like such a good boyfriend, you know, and all of my Christian boyfriends, or almost all of them, were trash, you know. And it's funny looking back on it, and I think that just seeing that that's not true is a big part of deconstruction, because, you know, just for me, even just being on sets and seeing people who were gay and seeing that they were happy, they were kind, I felt more loved from them, from the people that were in the cult. That whole thing was very eye-opening.
100%. It just shifted my fundamental belief on what love means, and what it means to be a good person, and what is morality. You know, morality is not a list of rules given to you by some God that you don't really know. It's how do we make sense of the world? How do we love each other? How do we show kindness to each other and not harm one another? And you know, you can get very philosophical. There are a lot of different things. I've kind of dipped my toe in all kinds of belief systems, and I'm at a place now where I'm just very open, and my concept of like belief is changed entirely, which I never thought would happen. I just always thought, like, if I can't know that this is true for sure, then how do I navigate the world? And now I'm in a place where I don't know what's true for sure necessarily, but I'm open to things, and it's a cool place to be. Something that my partner talks a lot about in her work is like the uncertainty of deconstruction, and how it can lead to a really beautiful sense of possibility. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be beautiful. It can be exciting. Venturing into the unknown does not mean hell. It does not mean sin. It can mean possibility. It can mean something greater than you ever imagined. And I've kind of tried to adopt that mentality as of late, as I'm still sort of, I do still feel a connection to the divine. I just don't know really what to make of it yet. And I'm just letting myself figure it out. You know?
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you started to realize that you didn't want to solely date men? Because I assume that was a big shift. I mean, growing up in these circles, I'm sure that that's not something that was really, I'm sure that you didn't even feel like it was an option at the time. So when did you start to realize that about yourself?
Yeah, I think like a lot of sort of late blooming queer folks, it's like very obvious in hindsight that you were always queer, but like you don't see it till you see it. And, you know, for me, obviously, my views on LGBTQ relationships and marriage equality had changed substantially throughout my deconstruction. And, you know, I went from believing that like this was bad to believing that it's not. And so I had been very immersed in a lot of queer community, because I do theater and I'm an actor, and I knew a lot of queer folks and loved them deeply, and always was a very strong ally, you know. And I
strong ally.
It's all the strong ally to gay pipeline it's a thing.
Oh, I've seen so many videos like that. They're like, I just thought I was very passionate about gay rights.
100%. Like, I think I cried when gay marriage was legalized. Like, I was just like, this is so beautiful. Like, you know, and I'm just like, why did I, you know, not that you can't be straight and feel that way, but you know, but I think that even though I had deconstructed a lot and had given myself permission to explore my sexuality more, it had just never, I think it had still never felt like an option, because this fantasy of the perfect man was still in my head. And like, when I looked into comp het and, you know, I heard other women's stories, I was like, this is sounding like me. Like the more I date men, the less satisfied I am with dating a man. Like it's the fantasy is crumbling very quickly before my eyes. And I'm realizing that like this fantasy of a man coming into my life and loving me was not, it just didn't feel right. And it's funny because I went through a pretty intense, like, it wasn't a full-blown relationship, but this person and I, this guy and I had sort of very intense like moment. And he was actually a very devoted Christian. And it was so strange because this was after my deconstruction. And it's like,
oh, wow.
We met in a very organic way. And I discovered how Christian he was throughout that process. And I was like, what does this mean? Like, I suddenly had this like resurgence of all these thoughts of like, what is God telling me? Like, is God telling me that I should go back to church because I'm into this Christian?
This man is sent to save you.
That's what I thought. Like, this was literally my, like, this is the man I had prayed for coming into my life at a time where I was no longer in that place anymore, but I still had this draw to him. And in hindsight, it feels like that was sort of the last, like, gasp of my, like, Christian self that was like, this is not actually what you want.
No.
Yeah, like it was like, maybe you can't. No, it's not for you. And right after that, I sort of went through another sort of spiritual sort of reckoning with myself. And ultimately, that's what led me to my girlfriend's content. And
oh my gosh.
she's the person that came onto my For You page. And I was like, who is that? And like, she is the person who kind of forced me to realize that I was queer. Like, and it hit me like it had never hit me before. And then after it hit me, I realized in hindsight that I had always been interested in women, and even gone so far as to say before that, like, maybe if you know, being bisexual wasn't a sin, I might be into that. You know, saying stuff like that throughout my whole life, and then not clocking it until suddenly I felt free enough to clock it. Like, it's really interesting.
So many people don't, you know, and I think this is something I was having a conversation with my best friend on our other podcast recently, because when I was 14, my very first kiss was a girl, and I dated her for, like, honestly, it was probably like a year on and off, but maybe like 6 months total or something. Yeah. And the whole time I was like, I'm going to hell, right? For sure. I'm like 14, I'm going to hell. And then I've just always dated men after that. And I still would say that I prefer men. Mm-hmm. I would say that. Mm-hmm. But I just recently, like in the last few months, I'm like, I don't actually know if I am straight, because I think maybe I've always said that I'm straight because I was so scared of hell.
Yeah.
You know, but like if I wasn't, kind of like what you were saying, like, well, if it wasn't a sin, would I? Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. Probably.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't think straight people say that. Exactly. So I'm like, maybe I'm not straight.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Honestly, the TikTok community of late blooming lesbians has really helped with this, because so many of them had that same journey. And I was like, I'm not alone. Like, I was so worried about adopting a label that didn't feel right. I didn't want to like call myself queer until it felt right to do so. But it was like, I obviously talked to a lot of my queer friends, and really, when I came out to myself, it all just kind of made sense. And a lot of the people in my life were like, yeah, it makes sense. And I, now having been with my girlfriend and talking about marriage and like feeling a love that I've literally never felt in my entire life, like it doesn't even come close to anything ever before. It just all makes sense. It just, in hindsight, it all makes sense. But it's one of those things that can exist below a level of consciousness, I think, for people, especially when you were raised in a world where it was just not an option. Even though people were gay, it was just not an option.
But not you.
Yeah, exactly. So,
oh my gosh. Yeah. So was it mostly a freeing process? It hasn't been that difficult for you, I guess?
Coming out was a really beautiful process for me. I have to say that I had some a little bit of grief around the thought of like, okay, I'm already a Black woman and now I'm going to be a Black queer woman. That's going to add hardship to my life. I think I had grief around that, but I also knew that like I'm someone that I think is very committed to authenticity, and there's no way that I could be closeted and know that I was queer. Like, I was closeted, but I wasn't closeted. I didn't know I was queer, and as soon as I knew it, I couldn't not be,
Unknowing.
it was like, I'm just not going to be that person, even if that means that I may lose opportunities or whatever the world is going to try to do to me. I have to do this. I have to be my honest self. And I think I had grief around that. Maybe one of my good friends, who's a gay man who grew up in the church, he described it as when he realized he was gay, he also had some grief around losing this sort of ideal life that he imagined for himself, of like this Christian wife. Even though he didn't want a wife, he had this like fantasy. And I think I had a little bit of that, of like, oh, it's never going to just be, like, there are some people who are not going to want to come to my wedding. There are going to be people who, for the rest of my life, people will think I'm living in sin. And so that part was hard, but outside of that, I pretty much was really excited to tell everybody I'm queer. Like, I was
That's awesome.
And it was a beautiful experience, and I'm lucky that I got to have it. And it makes me glad that I waited, I guess, or not waited so much as I let it come to me when I was ready. And I'm really glad that I did, because it was a really beautiful experience for me, and it's just opened my life so much.
How long have you guys been together now?
Just over a year.
Oh
So we just celebrated our 1 year, and she literally came on my For You page. So I like to think I manifested her.
So did you like slide into her DM?
I did. Yep, I did.
Brave. I
did it. And it's crazy. It's just crazy because I was just totally crushing on her from afar. And I just was like, let me slide in these DMs. And now we're in love. So I'm just like, listen, maybe God is real, like.
Oh my gosh. I accept this gift.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So looking back on all of the craziness, what do you wish you could tell your younger self? Or what do you wish you had known when you were growing up in those sorts of circles?
Oh, that's a good question. I would tell her to relax. I would tell her that everything is going to be fine, and you don't have to try so hard, that love is plentiful. You don't have to work so hard to have love. You don't have to work so hard to be loved, and you're a good person. Because I think I struggled a lot with that, of like thinking, am I good enough, or am I, if I want to tell this lie because I want to protect myself, am I just like the devil? I would just want her to know she's loved unconditionally, and she's a good person, and it's gonna be okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good and simple and real, because I think, for me, going back to the OCD thing, one of my, I can ruminate on, am I good? Am I a good person? And my husband's like, you are the most moral person, calm down, but I just, growing up, you're just taught that you're inherently evil. And I think it's very interesting thinking back to that one of your first memories, or at least being told about your dream of, what 4-year-old should be dreaming about burning in hell?
Right.
And it's like, well, yes, it was a beautiful dream because you went to heaven and you were saved, but it's like, but you also dreamed that you were burning in hell at the age of 4. And that's really heavy. So I think being able to, it would have been great as a kid to know you're good, you're not inherently wrong, and we can all just chill a bit, because I know I was constantly afraid of being spit out for being lukewarm. So you feel like you can't ever just relax and calm down.
Yeah, that's what I'd say to her. And I've been doing work like that in my like EMDR therapy, and like a lot of inner child stuff. And something I found in my partnership is like our inner children feel safe with each other. And that's sort of a really beautiful thing that we give each other, is like, when I spill something in the house, she'll be like, it's a spill friendly house, it's okay. We purposely try to like do these things for each other, that like, we know each other's trauma. We try to just like help each other out in that way. And I think that work is really, it's really important for me with my upbringing specifically. Yeah.
So what are you up to now?
So I am in New York right now. I'm kind of living a bit of a bi-coastal life, because me and my girlfriend are in a long distance relationship.
Really?
Yeah, we are long distance, but we're never apart. So
You're like on paper.
Yeah, we're like literally never apart. So we're figuring that out. But I'm making more content now. I really kind of leaned into my story times on TikTok, which is really exciting. And I love your
editing.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's so fun and fresh, and I love just the lighting. I'm like, I need your lighting.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still an actor and a writer, and I actually wrote a show centered around my experience living in New York as a purity ring wearing virgin. And so I've been in the process of pitching and trying to get that made. And so,
so cool.
That's my goal, is to lead to that and get some eyes on that and create the show for myself. It's I'll tell more later, but it's something that's very dear to my heart. And so I'm really eager to see where we can go with that.
That's awesome. Well, I know people have been so interested in your purity culture stories and everything. So I'm sure there would be a ton of people who can relate to that, an endless amount of millennials who,
thank you. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
honestly,
relate.
that's what this show is for. It's for the millennial who deconstructed. And I know there's a lot of us.
So many.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Azriél Patricia. And yeah, those are really the only two places I am. I really only stay on those two.
Perfect. I'm like, that's all you need, really. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been so great.
It's been wonderful. I feel like we could talk about a lot together, but this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you. And if you guys could please leave a review, that would be awesome. And share this episode with somebody who you think might like it. We are deconstructing people, and there are so many of us who I think can relate to each other's stories. So I will see you back next week for another episode of Heal Dish.